Is this thing on? Sounds like it's on. Okay, good deal. For those of you who were not with us last week, you're behind the power curve because we're not going back. We're picking up where we are, and we're finishing up Judges. So we're in Judges chapter 20. If you've got the outline or the questions from last week, we're going to pick up about question number 10. Next week, in here, we will be studying Galatians. So if you plan on being in here, Galatians sounds interesting to you, read at least the first 10 verses of chapter 1. If you have some kind of study material about Galatians, you might want to read up a little bit about the Galatian churches and maybe about the letter to the Galatians. Anyway, we are wrapping up Judges. This is, at the tail end of Judges, is absolutely the worst description of humanity possible. We've had a woman used, abused, neglected, died due to that use and abuse. She was then hacked up by her kind of husband. The parts of her were distributed amongst the 12 tribes, and the 12 tribes have come together to fix the problem. They did recognize there's a problem, but unfortunately they decided to fix it themselves. So they gather together and decide, well, we just need to talk to the folks in Benjamin. That's a good idea. They should have been included from the very beginning, don't you think? And they probably should have included God in this whole charade, but that's what got them started down this path anyway. God was neglected. God was omitted. God was ignored. So the Israelites come together, minus Benjamin, and they say, let's send to Benjamin and tell him, give us these scoundrels from the city of Gibeah, and we'll take care of them. Matter solved. Word goes to the folks in Benjamin, and Benjamin says, who are you to legislate to us what's going to be done? We're not giving them up. And they were then round up fighting men. So out of Benjamin, they come up with about, 26,000 men, I think it is. Yeah, 26,000 swordsmen plus 700 slingers. Like I said last week, I like that. They were left-handed, which is interesting. Being left-handed, I sort of thought that was pretty nice. Left-handed slingers who could hit a hair. That's pretty impressive. You can take a rock and hit a hair with it. So they've got this army, and they respond to Israel, we're not going to do it. So Israel rounds up its army, 400,000. 400,000 against 26,000. That right there sounds like pretty lopsided, right? They are roughly 15% the size of Israel's army. Now Israel gets a brilliant idea. Let's ask God who should fight first. They have already decided they're going to fight. They have already decided they're going to attack Benjamin. So now let's ask God who should fight first. That's the wrong question. The question should have been, God, what do you want us to do? The question should have been, how do we resolve this, God? The question should have been between all of the elders and the chief priest to work out ahead of time and say, this is what we're going to do. But as I said, God has been omitted. You remember the verse that I told you from the very beginning, and we hit on it time and time again. It just runs through the theme of Judges. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. And this is the perfect example. They're doing it again, doing what is right in their own eyes. It's interesting that God replies. Even though they've neglected God, even though they're not following God, even though they have decided on their own that this is what they're going to do, they approach God and say, who goes first? God says, Judah. If you remember back in chapter 1, who goes first? Judah. It's still decided. Judah goes first. We've decided we're going to fight against our brothers, and you tell us who goes first. God says Judah. They didn't seek his guidance about whether or not to fight. just who should go first. So he responded with the answer to the question they asked. God hadn't deserted them. They had deserted God. So they go into battle. And on the first battle, what happens? But 22,000 of those of Israel are killed. It doesn't mention anybody from Benjamin being killed. But 22,000 from Israel are killed. And so what do the Israelites do? Well, they get together and they cry and they weep and they mourn. And they ask God. They don't ask God, are we right? They don't ask God, should we offer a sin sacrifice for our own sin? They don't ask God anything other than, should we go up again? That's the question. Out of all the possible questions in the world they could ask, they said, should we go up again? And God says what? Go up again. So they go up again, and what happens? 18,000 of Israel are killed. Doesn't mention anybody from Benjamin dying that day. So now we've had 2 days of battle, and 40,000 of Israel have been killed. This time they go just a little bit further. They mourn and they weep. And finally, they ask the Lord again about continuing to fight. This time, they also offer burnt offerings. They offer fellowship offerings. It says they went to the house of the Lord, or your translation may say Bethel, but that means house of the Lord. So there's some disparity as to whether they actually went to the city called Bethel or they went to Shiloh where the house of the Lord was. And that's where Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, is the high priest. So my guess would be they went to Shiloh where the house of the Lord was, or Bethel. They fast until evening. They offer burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, and then they inquire of the Lord about continuing to fight. If you remember, in the way the sacrifices are laid out, what is sacrificed first? Which sacrifice goes first? On the Day of Atonement, which sacrifice goes first? On any other day, which sacrifice goes first? What's the process? Well, the process is the chief priest goes, or the high priest goes, and he washes himself. He puts on his regalia, and he sacrifices a sin offering for himself. Then he offers a sin offering for the people. Now, once you have offered a sin offering for yourself and for the people, what can you then do? Well, you can offer a peace offering or fellowship offering, because now you've established fellowship between you and God. As long as the sin was there, there's no fellowship there. They have assumed it's okay. They're offering a burnt offering, which is the last in order, and they have offered peace offerings after the burnt offering, but there's no sin offering there. But you see, they're doing what is right in their own eyes. They don't care about that. They got it all out of whack. The first thing is Phinehas should offer a sacrifice for his own sin. The second thing is Phinehas should offer a sacrifice for the sin of the people. Then you can have a peace offering that is related to the peace that you now have between you and God. Same way, if you have a problem with your brother, there's a sin offering, then there is a trespass offering that has to do with the disfellowship that you have between you and your brother. You know, Blake was talking about that earlier, about worship. Worship couldn't happen until what? Until the parties had been resolved. Same way here. You can't get to a burnt offering until you've taken care of the problems. Sin offering first, trespass offering second, peace offering third, then the burnt offering. That's where we're getting to worship. They got this all out of whack. They inquire of the Lord about continuing the battle. He says, yeah, go ahead. Tomorrow I'll give them into your hand. So the next day they defeat Benjamin. They strike down 25,100 of them. Maybe a little bit more than that, because if you add all that together, you know there's more than that. But it says about 600 of them got away. 30 more from Israel died that day. Benjamin is now minus every fighting man except 600, and they go hide in the rocks. That's 2%. 2% of their fighting force is left. Israel lost 10% of their fighting men. And you remember later when Samuel goes to Saul, the idea of getting Saul to be king, and what do you remember the two things that he said as why he shouldn't be? First one is he says, I am the smallest tribe in Israel, and I am the smallest clan within that tribe. And you know what? What he said was very true, because before we're done, Benjamin is fixing to be wiped out. Because Israel, after they had taken out the fighting men, then in chapter 20, verse 48, they turn around and take the sword to every town in Benjamin. They take out every animal, they take out every person, man, woman, child, and beast in Benjamin. You remember what God said was going to happen to Israel if they started behaving like the folks in Canaan that they were supposed to be driving out? What did he say he would do? He said, the very things that I was going to do to them, I will do to you. Deuteronomy chapter 28. And that's what's happening here. But God didn't say to do that. But that is what's happening here. They have taken it upon themselves. The Israelite army has taken it upon themselves now to wipe Benjamin off the map. Man, woman, and child. There are 600 fighting men left. That's it. They now have no wife. They have no children. They have no relatives. They have no friends. They have no family. They have no city. They have no home. Because Israel has wiped it off the map. They, in effect, had done what God said he would do if they started behaving like the Israelites. But just remember, God has been left out of everything so far. He's only been asked 3 questions, and he answered those questions. But that was it. They determined that they would go to war. They decided to wipe out the Benjaminites. They made the rash vow. And that's going to come back to haunt them, because now that he realized there's a problem, because these folks don't even have anybody to marry. One of the vows we made is we won't give our daughters to these Benjaminites. We can't do that. So we got to come up with a different plan. Where's God in all this? They're not talking to God in all of this. He's missing from the equation. They made a rash vow about their daughters. They also made a rash vow about participating in the war. Anybody that does not participate is what? Well, we're going to kill them. That's simple. They are building altars. They are offering sacrifices. They pretty much ignored the high priest. All of this should have started with a sin offering for themselves. So they said, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, here's what we're going to do. Who didn't show up for the fight? Well, Jabesh Gilead did not show up to fight. Okay, now we can fix this. We can fix this. We will go to Jabesh Gilead. We will wipe out every male there and every female that's had anything to do with a man there. We will find the virgins in Jabesh Gilead, and we will give them to the Benjaminite survivors, and thereby we will replenish this clan, this tribe. Sounds good. They mount up 12,000. They go in there and wipe out Jabesh Gilead. They kill all but 400 women who had not known a man. Well, simple math tells you that doesn't work, right? You got 600 fighters and you got 400 women. Doesn't work. So we got to come up with a more fitting solution for this. We've gone to Jabesh Gilead. We've wiped out a tribe, essentially Benjamin. Now we're wiping out a city to cure the problem. And we're going to make peace now with those remaining in Benjamin. Notice too, though, as I said before, God is missing out of this entire process. The people grieved. It's in. Look at verse 15, chapter 21, verse 15. There's an interesting thing here. We've totally ignored God through this entire situation except for asking him 3 questions, to which he responded specifically 3 answers. But you get down to chapter 21, verse 15, the people grieved for Benjamin because the Lord had made a gap in the tribes of Israel. Isn't it interesting? When we decide we're going to take a certain course of action, and we decide we're going to do this and do that, and we decide we're not going to do this and do that, and then the whole thing blows up in our face. What do? What do we say? God, why did you let that happen to me? Why did you do that to me? They have wiped out Benjamin, essentially. And now they're saying, why did you let that happen, God? Why did you do that? There's a gap now. We don't have 12 tribes. We only have 11. Why did you do that, God? They ask the same question we do, right? They're not so different. We make dumb decisions. We do dumb things. And then we say, God, why did you let that happen to me? That's what they're saying here. They mourn and they weep because God had made a gap in the tribes. Only problem is he had been conveniently left out of the entire decision-making process, and in the execution process, he had only been consulted about continuing the conflict. Even now, they're not seeking God's answer. Instead, they're coming up with it on their own. So let's match these up. We've taken care of 400 of our fighters. We're left 200 shy. You know there's a party coming up in Shiloh, and when that party comes on, the women dance. They're known to dance in the fields and dance along the roads. And tell you what we'll do. All of these fighters that do not have wives, they should go and they hide out around Shiloh. Now, do you reckon the leaders of Shiloh were present for this discussion? Do you reckon the high priest who was at Shiloh at the tabernacle, you reckon he was part of this discussion? Because it could be one of his daughters would be dancing out there, right? It could be that the leaders of Shiloh, that their daughters might be dancing out there. They say, well, you go hide out there and you kidnap these girls and you take them home, and if anybody says anything, we'll stick up for you. We'll say that this was because we did not allow them to have women after the war. And it'll be okay. You reckon anything went on in her head that said, you know, wiping out Benjamin was bad. Then turning around and wiping out Jabesh Gilead just for the fun of it, that was bad. And now encouraging, coming up with this idiotic plan to kidnap our own daughters for these men. Isn't that a bad idea? Isn't that a bad idea? Wasn't Jabesh Gilead a bad idea? Wasn't wiping out Benjamin a bad idea? Where was God in all this? In those days, there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. This is sick upon sick upon sick upon sick, which is what happens when God is out of the equation. If they had gone back, if they'd gone back and kept God in the equation, none of this would have ever happened. None of this would have ever happened. But at any point in there, if they had decided to insert God into the equation, the sickness could have stopped. And instead, we wiped Benjamin virtually off the map. And then we create a plan to reestablish Benjamin with our own sordid little brains. And all it requires is that we kill more people and kidnap young girls and force them into a marriage arrangement. Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. It shouldn't be surprising when God is obviously missing from the entire equation. When we leave God out of our life, when we leave God out of our decisions, when we ask God for help and then we ignore His answers, when we do not go to godly men and women who have been down that road before and ask them for advice, and we ignore their advice, when we blame God for the calamity that's in our lives, when we know good and well we brought it on ourselves and we deserve what we're getting, when we think we can fix it, no matter what it is, all by ourselves, there's a problem. Then we become just like the folks in Israel. There's no king in our life. And we are doing just exactly what is right in our own eyes. Our own limited vision, our own limited brain, our own limited experience. When the God of the universe is waiting to help us, wanting to help us, offering to help us, all we have to do is pull God back into our life, pull God back into our decision making, pull God back into everything in our life. Then we don't make dumb decisions. Or if we do, there's a way out instead of trying to fix it ourselves. Because as you've seen, they did a poor job. And as every one of you know, you've done a poor job too. I've done a poor job too. Because until God is first, God is only, and God is leading me, and I'm trusting Him, that's the only way we're getting out of this mess. I can't fix it. You can't fix it. We've tried that too, right? Doesn't work. At that time, the Israelites left that place and they went home to their tribes and their clans, each to his own inheritance. We fixed it. We fixed it. What a despicable summary of what Israel has done and what Israel has become. You know, there's folks around even today that think Israel, the Israelites, should have the promised land. Even today. Guess what? They cashed that in shortly after Joshua departed this world. The only reason they stayed there as long as they did is because God was bringing Jesus into this world in Jerusalem. That's it. They gave up their promise a long, 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 long time ago. If we want to worship God, just like they wanted to worship God, first thing is you have to take care of the sin in your life. Just like that's what they needed to do. As soon as they realized there was sin, they needed to repent and take care of the sin. The sin offering needed to come first. The relationship they had with brother and brother, that came second. Trespass offering had to be made. Then a fellowship offering can be made because now fellowship has been reestablished between you and God and between you and your brother. Peace offering or fellowship offering. Then you can offer the burnt offering. Then you can offer worship. Same is true with us. Clear the sin up in our life. Come to Jesus. Have Him wash it all away. Then we can worship God. Then we can submit to God. Then we can talk to God. then we are the son and daughter of God, and He is leading our life. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. I pray that that's not the case for you and me, but rather that God is the king in our life. And we do what He says is right. We go the direction He wants us to go, and when we falter, we turn to Him and don't try to fix it. Thank you very much for your attention today. We're going to pick up in this class in the book of Galatians next week. So Galatians chapter 1, verses 1 through 10. Thank you much.